Today I'm going to show you how to take broken flower pots and turn them into something truly beautiful. Let's go play in the dirt. Hello, I'm Carol and welcome to my handcrafted garden. Today I'm doing something really special. It's something I do every year, and it's something I do with one thing that I might otherwise have thrown away. This is my mother-in-law's pot, and it's an old terracotta pot, and it was all in one piece when she gave it to me, but now it's in several pieces because it got dropped and I don't want to throw it away. So I have discovered ways to use this in my garden every year, and so this year I'm planting it with succulents, and I'm also doing this for a class that I'm teaching at our local library. I teach a gardening class, and so I'm doing a program on how to container garden in broken pots. So this is the pot. These are two pieces that are broken out of the side of it. And if you notice, there's a nice huge crack right here, and I've actually glued it back together on that particular crack because I want to have enough space to use dirt in my pot. And so first I gather my supplies. I have some dirt, I have some broken pieces of pot that I'm going to use with it. I have some plants, and if you notice on the plants, these are sort of a gray and white with a tiny little bit of red on this one. And then over here, these are more of a lemon yellow, lime yellow, with a hint of red here, and with a yellow sedum, I don't know if you can see that here, and then with a sansevieria with some yellow on it right there. So these are my color schemes, and when I think about design, I always think about color first, and so I've picked colors that blend very nicely with each other, that have just a hint of red contrast or pink contrast here and there. But I've also chosen plants with a variety of textures. Some of them are kind of prickly, some of them are smooth, some of them have variegations on the tips, some of them are pointy, some of them are round. And so there's a whole variety of color and shape and texture that's going to provide interest in my container garden. And so as you get started with the container garden, the first thing you need to think about is soil. And because these are succulents, I'm using soil, and I'm going to be adding just a little bit of perlite to my soil so that it will be perfect for my succulents. I'm going to get the perlite. So this is my perlite, and perlite helps the soil to drain really quickly, and it keeps the soil dry, which is exactly what I need for the succulents. And if I were doing this in a plastic pot, I'd use maybe 40 to 50% of perlite and soil, but because this is a terracotta pot, it's porous and the water evaporates out the side, so I don't need quite as much perlite for my succulents. But it does need maybe 30–35% soil and perlite. And so I'll be adding that along the way as I put my pot together. And so when you're thinking about planting in a broken pot, think about retaining walls that hold the soil in a stairway fashion. And so you're going to have a little bit of soil in the bottom, and I'm going to place the two biggest pieces first. And I need just enough soil to hold them in place, really. And I'm going to use this to retain the soil that I'm going to put behind it. And then I'm going to use this one. If I put them together at the broken piece, they only go that far down, and I want it to go a little farther down, so I'm gonna overlap those pieces like that. And I'm gonna need to add some soil because this little guy is not gonna stand up without it. I'm going to leave the soil fairly loose because I'm going to be planting plants, but right around the terracotta pieces I'm going to pack it in so that that terracotta piece will stay where I put it. And sometimes they don't cooperate very well, but you just keep working with it until. And I'm going to leave the soil fairly loose because I'm going to be planting plants, but right around the terracotta pieces I'm going to pack it in so that that terracotta piece will stay where I put it. And sometimes they don't cooperate very well, but you just keep working with it until it stands up. There we go. And so now that I have these two pieces, I'm going to fill in behind. Now I could stop right here and have one layer of plants here and one layer of plants in the back, but because this pot is so tall, I'm actually going to put a third layer in the back, and I'm going to use a piece of terracotta that doesn't belong with this pot, but I'm also going to use, this is another one of my mother-in-law's pots that got broken. She had a lot of pots. I don't just break them, but yeah, this one got broken too, so I'm going to use this one in the background because it provides a nice contrast with the teal and the orange. So I'm going to add a little more soil. And on my third layer, I want the top of the pots to line up at the top edge. So I'm going to do this. And again, I'm only packing the soil enough to hold the pots in place. And I'm going to get the crepe myrtle blooms out. And so I have a little broken piece here, and I'm going to want that to hold up. So I'm going to stick another little piece right in here just so that the soil doesn't escape on the side right there. And I've learned by experience that it will escape. As soon as you water it, the soil wants to flow down, so you want to be sure you've got a retaining pot to hold everything in place so that when you water it, it stays in place. So this is my basic design, and I'm ready to think about plants. Now I want some plants to spill out the front of the pot, and I want some plants to thrill up into the air at the back of the pot, and then I'm going to fill with plants in between. And that's one way to think about the design of the container garden. But here's another way to think about that design. You can think of this part as one flower bed, and this part as a second flower bed, and then this part up at the top as a third flower bed. And so if you think of it that way, you can have one color scheme going on down here and another one going on in the middle, and then a third one coming out the top. And that kind of thinking gives organization to your flower pot. So it doesn't just look like you've thrown a bunch of plants in here together. It actually looks like there's some thought behind it, and that there's a plan and a design to the flowers or the plants that you're putting in there. So I'm thinking about using the Sansevieria because it grows up tall, and I've got two different kinds in here, and they've kind of had a hard winter in the greenhouse, and they've gotten a little bit beat up in the greenhouse, and that's okay because I know that Sansevieria recovers, and as soon as it starts growing new shoots out of the pot, I can cut off the leaf that might look a little bit sad, and it will grow another leaf in return. So I don't worry about a plant that might have had a little bit of damage from a storm. I actually prepare it and plan on pruning it so that it can flush out and grow new leaves. And so I want this one to go right in the top. And then that's going to leave me with two that are going to come out on the side. And so I've got a couple of options. this one could come right out the top. And I kind of like sort of the chalky color, how that blends with the teal on that pot. And my other thought was possibly using a jade. And you'll notice the jade is kind of shiny. And I really am thinking I'd rather not have a shiny thing coming out of this dull colored pot here. So I think I'm going to use this in these two pots. And so this coming out the top will be yellow and green. And then this one's kind of got a blue-green going. And so in this middle area, I think I might want something kind of gray, like maybe this little guy with maybe some sedum coming out over the edge for the middle area. And then in the bottom, I want some of this yellow sedum that grows really short, and then a dangling sedum that's going to come out and hang over the edge there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, and as I start putting these in the dirt, I might change my mind a little bit, but let's plant some of these and just see how it's going to look. So anytime I'm planting succulents in a new pot, I want the soil to be light and fluffy in the new pot. So when I'm taking them out of the old pot, I usually shake off the soil around the roots and actually plant it in fresh soil. And that's what I'm going to do with the sansevieria. So I've actually got most of the soil off, and you can see that the two different varieties, they fall apart pretty well. They're not root bound in this pot at all, but there are definitely two different kinds growing in here, and I'm really liking this one with that gray-green color in the middle and the yellow on the outside edge. I'm really liking that one better than the solid. So there's a little bit of root on here, and when you're working with succulents, if it's too much root for the pot that you're using, you can actually prune the roots on it, but I think I'm going to leave these roots just like they are and let them grow on down into the soil. And this is where it gets a little tricky. You kind of have to hold your pot in place. Now, I don't want to bury the sansevieria deeper in the soil than where it was in the original pot, and you can see the line here where it goes from green to white. That's the soil surface line, and that's exactly how deep I want to plant it in its new home. And you'll notice the tall leaves are in the front, and I really want to have the short leaves in the front, so I'm going to turn it around so that these little short leaves. And I've also noticed this happens very easily. It's easy to get soil inside the cup of the plant, and if you do that, it will cause the plant to rot. So anytime you notice that, shake it out and start over, because you don't want soil in that little crevice. And if the soil doesn't cooperate, you might need a little brush, a little stick, a little fork to get that soil out. That way you don't compromise your plant. And I'm going to pack it just a little bit, just enough so that the plant holds itself upright. Once it gets established in this pots, the root will hold the plant upright. But when you're repotting it, sometimes you got to give it just a little bit of support. You want to make sure it's in the center of the pot, that the leaves are standing up in the direction you want them to stand. Like that. Now my next plant is going to go in the little teal pots, and I have 2 of them. And I'm going to have to take quite a bit of soil away from it so I can actually get it in that little crevice. So I'm going to dump it out. Shake it off. Position it like I want it. And so my scoop is a little too big for that little space. So sometimes it's really helpful to have different sizes of scoop. And so I'm going to use my little scoop. Again, I don't want to bury it too deep, but I don't want it too shallow either. I want it right at the surface where it was in the original pot. And I need to pack the soil a little bit, but only enough so that it holds the plant up. The roots on a succulent tend to be pretty fragile and they break easily, so you never want to pack the soil when you're planting a succulent. You want it just close enough to hold the plant. So it's perfectly positioned. It's not too shallow, it's not too deep in the soil. It's packed just enough so that the plant stands upright. So I think that one's ready. So this is the second one. I'm going to put in the second pot, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to empty the soil, shape off as much as I can. And so this one actually has 2 plants in it. One's rather small, one's upright, but when I look at this one, it's the same situation. There's 2 plants in it, so I'm going to leave it that way. And I've got some room to tilt the pot out of the way a little bit. I want to get both plants situated. I'm going to hold them up while I put the soil in. Sometimes you can hold a succulent by the stems and leaf, and sometimes that works really well. Sometimes when you grab them by the leaf just breaks off. So you always want to be careful how you handle your succulent so you don't damage it to the point that it's not useful in your project anymore. And so now that I've got the soil in, get the plant like I want it, then I can scoot the pot back where it belongs. Now I need more soil. I'm going to shake the soil off the leaves as I work with it. Same situation as the Sansevieria. When you get the leaves in the soil, they would rather rot than grow that way, so you don't want them to rot. And always when you're planting succulents, you'll think you've got it situated with plenty of soil, but after it sits for a few days and you water it, sometimes you have to come back and put more soil in because it just settles. The soil that you use with a succulent is very light and airy, and you want to keep it that way as much as possible. Okay, so I have the first 3 placed, and I'm just going to use a brush and do a little bit of housekeeping right there. And now I'm ready for my next layer of plants. And for this one, I've got 3 that I want to use, and they're just growing roots right now, so I can actually just pull them out of the soil. And so these are going to go here. There it is. Cluster of 3 in that corner. And then I'm going to use a little bit of sedum, with a little bit of pink on it. And this one has a little bit bigger roots, so I'm going to go ahead and dump the soil. Shake off as much as I can. And the sedum kind of slips apart as you get the soil off of it, and that's fine because I don't want to put it all in one big clump. And I want to situate it so that it kind of drapes off of the edge like that. I don't really want it standing up tall. I really want it to kind of lay down. So I'm going to put a ghost plant next to this. And this is another one that's still growing a root, so it makes it a little bit easier to work with. I'm going to take just a couple of leaves off the bottom. And I've got one little hole right here. I think I will put a little sedum in that hole. I've lost my seed. Oh, here it is. And I want just enough to stand up just a little bit right here. So that brings us to our last layer. And so I've got yellow and green up here, gray in the middle. I'm going to finish with some yellow and green in the bottom. I'm going to use these little guys. And this one's a little bit trickier because we got a skinny space. Got to finish out the soil. I'm just going to shake out as much as I can. Use my little bitty scoop again. These come in very handy for these little spaces. I'm just going to kind of stair step them along this curved edge. So I've got two here, and I'm going to bring in this long sedum. Go right in the middle. And so it's basically planted. I've got lots of dirt where it doesn't need to be, so I'm going to do some cleanup work with my brush. And if that doesn't get the dirt off, you could also use a spray bottle with water in it. That's very helpful for getting the soil off of the leaves of your plants so that they don't rot. So that's basically my garden. I'm going to spend the next 2 or 3 days packing the soil in where it seems to fall out, watering a little bit to see where the soil drains, and we'll come back and look at it in a week. It has been a week since I planted my broken pot garden, and I have purposefully not watered it because when you disturb the roots of a succulent, they need time to recover in a very dry environment. Moisture can easily cause them to rot, especially when they're under stress. So I've just let it sit. I've watched how the plants settled in. I've tapped the pot occasionally, just getting it to sink in. And I've looked at it and decided, what else do I need to do? And one thing I want to do is add some rocks as a top covering on the soil, because I really don't like seeing the soil with the perlite in it, and I think that distracts. So I'm going to add a few pebbles, and I picked pebbles that are a very natural color. I didn't want to make them be a spotlight in the garden. I just want them to provide some consistency in terms of covering up the soil. There's just a few places where the soil, I can see it. Whoop, one little leaf fell off. You have to be very careful when you're working around the leaves of a succulent. But there are only a few places here where I can see the soil, and I really can't see it at all down here, so I'm not gonna put any rocks down there, but I am gonna kind of clean it up a little bit because I have a few rocks that escaped. So that's the finishing touch on my garden, and the next thing to do is to actually water it. And so succulents like to be dry, and they like to stay dry for a good long while, but when they get water, it needs to be a deep watering. You need to be sure that all of the roots are moist. So if you're in a hurry and you just spray the top of your succulents, they'll be okay for 2 or 3 times doing that, but they're going to need a thorough watering at least every other month, so that you give them enough water that you actually see it coming out of the bottom of the pot. And one of the reasons why you do this is because soil that has become completely dry becomes hydrophobic, and that means it can actually repel water instead of soaking it in. And so if the soil has gotten very dry around the roots of the plant, it would be really easy to water it, and the water flows across the top of the plant and down the sides of the pot and out the bottom without actually reaching the roots of the plant. So when you do water your succulent every other month or so, at least once every other month or so, water it deeply so that you're sure that the moisture is actually seeping into the soil and getting to the roots of your plant. And so I'm looking around. This looks good. Right here I see some soil that tried to escape, and that's common the first couple of times you water. When the water flows down the pot, the soil also can flow, and so you just need to pay attention to that little detail and make sure that you don't wash your soil away every time you water. So these plants all have very similar needs. They are all succulents. They all like it dry. But I do know that some of them can take a lot of sun, while others cannot take a lot of sun. So I'm going to position this in mostly shade, where it gets dappled sun from the trees overhead, a little bit of sun, but being sure that I protect the plants in here that prefer the shady areas. And one thing that the sun could do, if I had used all succulents that could take all of the sun, this garden would take on a whole lot of color, because these plants in particular, when they get a lot of sun, they turn orange, and it's a really beautiful orange. But for this garden, it's going to be in the shade, and I'm going to enjoy them green instead of orange. So I hope I have taught you a way that you can handcraft in your garden. I hope I've answered all your questions, and if I haven't, please let me know in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this, give us a like and consider subscribing, because every click matters. Thanks for playing in the dirt with me today, and I'll see you next time.